selling doesn't necessarily have to be money, exchanging hands. Some people would say it's like an exchange of money. I think it's like maybe more so the exchange of value, and that could be anything, really in life, right? So if sales is all about just helping to guide someone to change, like we're doing that all the time. So I just try to dispel that myth, and that I just feel like there's skills that we all possess that some people don't think are sales skills, but the people that are trained salespeople know that they're absolutely critical to sales, and those are human skills. Some people call them soft skills, but human skills like curiosity, like empathy, like perspective taking, and listening, right? These are all things that when you study those different things, really at the end of the day, that's helping someone feeling, we all have those experiences. Maybe anybody listening to this can think of those experiences where you don't feel like it was sold. It was like, oh, it was just natural. This was something that just felt logical for me to do because it.
Welcome to Narrative's Leadership Story Talks, where great leaders go beyond the bottom line to create lasting impact. Join hosts Jerome Deroy and Julienne Ryan as they uncover the stories behind real-world challenges, offering practical insights to help you lead with empathy, authenticity, and purpose. Each episode dives into how leaders use storytelling to build trust, foster connection, and inspire action. Whether you're navigating workplace dynamics, driving change, or building high-performing teams.
Welcome to Leadership Story Talks. I'm Jerome Deroy, CEO of Narrative.
And I'm Julienne Ryan. It's great to be here.
Great to see you again. And before we move on to introducing our guest, I want to remind our listeners to subscribe to the podcast, Leadership Story Talks, wherever you find your podcasts. Leave a review. And also check out our YouTube channel, the Narrative, N-A-R-A-T-I-V YouTube channel, where we also post these episodes. You'll find lots of information in the episode notes, and you can also go to narrative.com, narrativ.com/podcast to find our previous episodes in our archive. All right, without further ado now, I'm going to introduce our guest, Alex Smith. Alex has been in professional sales for over 18 years. He's held roles in door-to-door sales, small business sales, and currently in EdTech software sales. He's currently an account executive at Docebo, a learning technology company where he helps people love not just what they learn, but how they learn it. Alex also hosts a unique sales podcast, which is how I know Alex, called Sell by Being Human, that shines a light on people who practice the art of sales through the lens of human connection. He loves fostering connections that make people feel inspired and fulfilled to do their best work. His philosophy in sales is that we sell by being human, not despite it. He's been ranked as a top sales voice on LinkedIn, a keynote speaker on the Sales Success Summit, which exclusively features top salespeople. He's been a closing speaker with Disrupt HR Orlando, and also a featured speaker on Prezi.com. Really excited to have you on the show, Alex. Welcome.
Awesome. Yes, I love hearing my bio. I hear so many bios with being a host of a podcast, but that was great. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great, wonderful to have you. And as your bio alluded to, we're going to talk about sales and storytelling and all the things that are around sales. And I think you have quite a unique, enthusiastic, passionate point of view about sales. And I guess I'd like to start at the beginning. How did you get into this field of sales?
Yeah, it's a great question. I never like no, like I can't remember a time where like I decided to get in, like I've like I feel like we all sell things like very early on in life, and maybe I just like noticed it, and I found a liking to it like from an early age. So like when I was 8 years old, I was going door to door selling the old catalogs with like hams and cheeses with my mom in the car on the side of the road. And maybe I was just trying to be this cute little kid, but I was like, I don't know if it was like a school kind of thing. So you gotta, back in the day, back in my day, there were like, little catalogs, paper catalogs, you could go and like around Christmas time, actually, people are buying like hams and cheeses through catalogs, and I would go door to door and sign people up and take and get money from them. And I think I say on my LinkedIn profile, it was the motivation was all it took was like a Sony boombox to like a top seller could get a Sony boombox. So I was I was hooked. So say no more. So I ended up getting that Sony boombox, and that's kind of where just the love of just being able to kind of like talk to people and kind of convince them of certain things. And yeah, that translated later to like paper route jobs and things like that. And to my schooling was around communications, and I wanted to get into PR and couldn't, didn't really find a big break there. And so then the first job out of school was really, just kind of like door-to-door sales, like the hardest thing you could
Mm,
possibly do, full commission sales, and just a lot of roles since then into what I do now. But yeah, I feel like it's always been there in some way. Yeah.
And what made the difference? What would, looking back at little you, and then you as you matured and won more things and was successful, what do you attribute it to?
It's a good question. I think I was always like, well, first, I think just my attitude. I was someone that didn't like let rejection really affect me personally, like too much. I feel like I could continue to go. I mean, like just as a little kid, you'd think of like how many people are slamming doors in your face and saying no to you, and and you're just keeping going on. So like I had this motivation of like I get in what I like what I put in, and if it's up to be like if it's to be, it's up to me sort of thing. So I had this like early on motivation. I think that's what you have to have if you're going to do it professionally. And we can talk about how I believe we all sell in different ways. It's just salespeople that are willing to admit it, let's say. But I think like, yeah, what made a difference in why I've sustained it, it's just, I do have I just have a love with like really trying to understand people, and I'm really curious and like asking good questions and solving, problems, whatever that was, or even early in my career, like I'm trying to solve a problem for you, even if I'm trying to give you a deal on some pizza or a restaurant or something like that. I'm trying to help you with something that, maybe save money on something that you're already buying. And later on, those are just that went from small problems to, very large business problems that I'm helping people solve today. So yeah, it's kind of that combination of, just being able to let things slip off my, back a little bit, but then also the love of, really understanding people is kind of what's helped sustain me, I think. Yeah.
mm.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's a great question. Because I think that idea, well, so I want to get back to one idea you talked about earlier, which is that, um, everyone sells, and there's, whether we admit it or not, and the salespeople are the ones that do admit it. And I guess with that as well, well, I'm wondering about why that is. But one of the theories that we've talked about, and I think something that we all have experienced, is that salespeople in general have somewhat of a bad rap. And so, uh, you know, that idea that I'm selling even though I don't have that title might come across as, oh no, icky. I don't, that's not what I do. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are about that, because I know that's something you're very passionate about, and like to dispel. So
Yeah.
the floor is yours.
Yeah. I mean, you can go a lot of different places with it. I think like the reason for my podcast, Sell by Being Human, and it's almost, kind of almost like, I don't know if oxymoron is the right word, but some people have said, well, if I'm if I'm being human, then I'm like not selling because I'm putting on an act or something like that. And I don't believe that. I think they're one and the same. I think you can. I want to dispel the myths because, yeah, I mean, there's a book that really the impetus to me starting it and some inspiration of me starting it was a book called To Sell is Human, and it's written by someone who is not a sales coach or a trainer or like a salesperson by trade. It's written by Dan Pink, and he's like Marshall, well, Malcolm Gladwell or Adam Grant. These are just like writers that think about, like, they try to connect dots in the world, right? And he's written on drive and motivation, the science of timing, called a book called When, and he just looked at the selling. And I actually interviewed him, and he said what really kind of like inspired him to write it is because there's all sorts of sales training and coaching books on what to say, how to say it, and all sorts of. But he was trying to dispel the myth that, like, selling is like the movies that we see. And I think, like, just pop culture, it's easy for stereotypes to emerge on, if you've anybody's seen Wolf of Wall Street, or Glengarry Glen Ross. These are great sales movies, but they depict these like hard closers, always be closing. And like, we can think of the used car salesman, and he did a study and of thousands of people, and he said, what's the first word that you think of when you think of sales? And the word cloud was the worst. I mean, it was like pushy, ego driven, money. And he's like, well, yeah, but like, what are we doing every day? Like, at what point, what part of your job? And anybody listening to this can ask themselves this question: what part of your job contains some bit of persuading, convincing, influencing, or moving people to change, right?
Mm.
Well, to get your job, you had to move someone from going one direction and maybe selecting another candidate, and going a different direction and selecting you. So that was a sales interaction, right? Like, all sales is, to me, is change, is trying to guide someone to change, right? We can talk about all sorts of definitions of it, but, like, selling doesn't necessarily have to be money. Exchanging hands. Some people would say it's an exchange of money. Um, I think it's like maybe more so the exchange of value. And that could be anything, like, really in life, right? So if sales is all about just helping to guide someone to change, like, we're doing that all the time. So I just try to dispel that myth, and that I just feel like there's skills that we all possess that some people don't think are sales skills, but the people that are trained salespeople know that they're absolutely critical to sales, and those are human skills. Some people call them soft skills, but human skills like curiosity, like empathy, like perspective taking, and and listening, right? These are all things that, like, when you like study those different things, really, like, at the end of the day, that's helping someone feeling like, we all have those experiences. Maybe anybody listening to this can think of those experiences where you don't feel like it was sold. It was like, oh, it was just natural. This was something that just felt logical for me to do because it really benefited me, and that person just opened the door and showed me that, and helped me understand something that I didn't really realize before. And that's like the best sales, where we don't feel sold to. It's just we feel benefited because of, and we feel like that person aligned with us. And that's all sales is to me, is that alignment. But of course, like, Hollywood would make us want to think something else. But I'm trying to hopefully dispel that, with different
Yeah,
stories of people throughout the workforce. Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, no, that's great. And you've just reminded me of something, because and I want to tell this story and then see what you think, because it
Hmm.
was really interesting. So you talked about, you know, earlier, kind of what motivates you is understanding people, helping people, right? That's kind of, and the fact that, your rejection sort of rolls off your back a little bit, and but you've got this kind of North Star of, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to understand and help people, which I think is very, very useful, because once I think about that in terms of, okay, my next meeting, my next call, it takes it out of me, and it starts to make me focus on the person that I'm actually going to be in a meeting with, whether it's a sales meeting or not, right? Because that's the other thing, is we don't really know when, I mean, unless you are a salesperson and that is your job, I think for everyone else, you don't really know when you're going to be selling something. I've been in meetings where at the end of the meeting, it's like, oh, that person really liked that idea that I just, threw into the meeting. And it seems like we're going to go that route. Oh, I just sold something, right? I just sold them on that idea. And I think those successful meetings that I've had, you've just made me realize this, is when I've not really been thinking about that. I've been thinking about what's good for this person that I'm meeting with, and what's good for us collectively, right? Those are the things that if I'm driven by that, then I should be okay. But if I'm not, if I'm driven by, ooh, I hope I can impress someone, or I hope I can, make my number and get my goal. It's all about me. So that was just one comment. The story that I have to tell is I moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico from New York a few years ago. And when I lived in New York for almost 20 years, I didn't have a car. I didn't need one. Never, whenever I needed one, I would just rent one. And so, but here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, things are further, and it's just not the same lifestyle at all. So I had to get a car. So anyway, so I go to different car dealerships and go to this one dealership, and there was a line of people sort of right outside of the car dealership. And when I parked there with my wife, we had a rental car. We get out of the car, and about 8 or 9 of them descend on us, all dressed the same. They were dressed in black, actually. So it's very, very impressive and intimidating. We're like, oh, I don't know if I want to buy a car from here. And anyway, one of them gets there first and just talks to us and says, welcome, blah, blah, blah. And we go into the car, and we start to do a test run. And he's in there, he's in the back seat, and he's asking us all these questions. None of them landed. It was sort of like, oh, let me tell you about my girlfriend, and the first time that we did this or that. I hope it's going to work out. And meanwhile, I'm with my wife. He hasn't asked us any questions about us. We have 2 kids. Like, we don't relate to this guy at all. And so it's about 5 minutes, and then we get to the dealership. We get out of the car. He wants to show us some numbers and introduce us to his boss. His boss comes out, and he's kind of the manager of the thing. And he brings us into his office, and he repeats some of the things that the guy said about the car. And then he shows me some numbers. And as I'm looking at this stuff, he tells me this story. He tells me, that car that you looked at a couple of years ago, I had the older version of that car. And I was driving my entire family. I got 4 kids and my wife. And we're about to go onto the freeway. And before the freeway, there's an intersection. And this guy, out of nowhere, this other car just T-bones us. Drunk driver. Nobody was hurt, not even a scratch. That's the kind of car that you could be getting into with your family. It still hits me very hard. Like, it's still, I think of
Hit me.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Suddenly he related to me the fact that he had a family, I have a family. These are all the things. My wife, on the way to the dealership, she was like, I don't really care about the car. It needs to be safe. And so this guy just,
Boom.
I don't know if
Yeah.
it was intuition,
Yeah.
whatever. And so suddenly I was relating to that much better, right? And we were on a human level, right?
Yes.
So I
Yeah.
just tell that story because that's the difference to me. It's sort of like,
Yes.
are you relating to someone or not?
Yeah.
And I'm curious what that brings up for you, Alex, and maybe Jules as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you with me, but I think Jules, I mean, like we can all probably think of a story now because you just told that story in our lives. That's what I think of, and yeah, I mean, you actually made me think of like, yeah, when you're not selling with an agenda and you're just kind of coming up with an idea, that you don't feel like you're necessarily like, like I'll use the word, you're not necessarily feeling like you're selling or you're trying to push something or get something approved for you. I think I told you before this, like there's a great quote from a sales trainer that I follow, and his name's Anthony Iannarino, and he says selling is not something you do to someone; it's something you do for and with someone. So think of that story that person did it for and with you. Like he didn't even, I mean, maybe he had just had the intuition. He could have just asked, I mean, a very simple question could have been like, hey, how, like, tell me like more about your family, or do you have a family, or like what's important to you in a car, like just anything like about you, about not the car. But he just kind of like probably knew, and then just told you a story and wasn't even necessarily trying to talk about the numbers or anything about like buying the car. It was just helping you kind of, like put envision a situation where you could feel safe because of something. And we can talk about how you could frame those stories and what he did there. But yeah, I just feel like, yeah, it's all about like trying to, I say my understanding strategy is my sales strategy, because if someone feels seen, heard, and understood, then whatever else you're talking about, like they're more apt to tell you more information. They're more apt to stay longer. Had that guy not come out, you'd have just been like, even if it was a good deal, even if there was saving money, maybe you'd just been like, all right, like we'll come back and let you all know and maybe go on to the next dealership, right? Because that was the experience. So it's all about like how you make someone feel and that transfer of emotion. That's what I think of. But yeah, Jules, I
Yeah.
don't know if you have something as well, but yeah,
Yeah, the word that came to mind was relatability, but before
yeah,
that word came to mind, the word color, it came to mind because I went in the last time I bought a car, I was already taking advantage of all the research that available to now.
yeah,
And the
yeah,
person started with color, and I was like, okay, no, this is not where I want to go. I wanted more informed technological,
yeah.
like records and everything, but he went to a very he presumed that would be the only thing I'd be worried about. So,
Yeah.
so
It's interesting.
I
I mean,
moved on, so to speak,
Yeah.
because it was the beginning of a relationship. I
Yeah,
expected more.
exactly. Exactly.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, so I'm curious about this, Alex, in terms of your experience and knowledge around this. Like, what do you think? We've talked about very human traits, and you made this point through the Daniel Pink book, To Sell is Human, which I think we'll definitely put into our episode notes because that's a great resource, great book. And what do you think kind of salespeople need to learn the most? Like, if we were like, because these sound to me like relatability, building a relationship, understanding someone, asking questions. Like, is in your view, is this all learnable?
Yeah, no, I mean, I believe so. Like, I think, some people might say soft skills are innate or human skills are innate, and you just kind of have them. People are kind of either an introvert or an extrovert, and I don't totally subscribe to that. I think people kind of like can, lean one way or another, kind of in the middle of certain things. But yeah, I mean, I think, all salespeople need to unlearn a lot of stuff, and probably way more than they need to learn, And so,
Mm.
like, trained salespeople are learning like frameworks and like, steps and methodologies and, step by step and taking people through to a close at the very end. And, there are some, benefits in some of those different scientific methods of sales, no doubt. But, if you subscribe to just one way and you're not, looking at anything else, then you're kind of ignoring like the whole reason for like what sales truly means. And like I said, like I think some of the things you can learn is, what that guy did is learning like how to craft a narrative and a story that is relatable to someone. I think those are things, and how to connect with people on a human level, and just some of the things that you can say and how you say them, how you word certain things, what gets people interested and not making them feel like they're sold. So I think those are different, things. And yeah, we can kind of talk through some of those different things, but I think, one of just the core things is just being able to, kind of create credibility around someone other than yourself, maybe around a story or a situation or like a customer story or something like that, that because people are going into any, like, there people, we all go into like situations with like our antennas up, right? Because we've been sold too. I sometimes say like I pay the penance for all the poor salespeople that have come before me, right? Anytime you get a cold call, you're like, oh, this person's selling me. Or anytime you get a new client call, it's like, this person is the salesperson, I am the client. Okay, what are you going to sell me? Or what are you going to wool you're going to pull over my eyes? So you kind of have to learn how to kind of break down that armor to people. And there's different, ways. And I think one of them, a key way is like how you frame your story or narrative around credibility, for sure, is some of the things I'm
Mm.
thinking about. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I do want to get to that point around storytelling and the role of storytelling as you see it, because we at Narrative and on this podcast we talk about storytelling for a variety of different applications and contexts. Because just like I subscribe to this, that selling is human, storytelling is human as well, right? It's one of the things that we've been doing for millennia, to tell stories, and so it comes very naturally, just to human beings in general. But it is a skill. Talk about unlearning and relearning, that a lot of people have had to relearn, and and I'm curious from your point of view, what is that role of storytelling? And I'm thinking, in terms of the field that you're in, learning technology, and I don't know if it falls
Yeah.
under EdTech, or
Yeah.
if that's what
Yeah.
we could call it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, that strikes me that's a fairly recent development. I mean, now we're probably talking a couple decades, but something that is fairly new in the world.
Hmm.
And I'm
Hmm.
curious, how you see the role of storytelling to introduce something that's potentially brand new to some people. And here's you're used to learning this way. Now we're showing you a new way of learning. First of all, is
Yeah.
that relevant? And second of all, how does that land for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think so I sell learning software, and in software terms, learning management software are some of the just a broad strokes overview of our products that we offer, and it's just ways to kind of help companies go through a learning experience on products. It could be for their customers, their internal employees, maybe partners, and ways to make that more enjoyable, right? And we're the software that kind of enables that to happen. And so a lot of times software companies, or really any company, you go on their website, like somebody can go on our website, on Docebo's website, and they could read customer case studies and stories, right? But it's just one way. It's us talking kind of at you and just to kind of gather information. And a lot of times people now, like you said, Jules, like you can get a lot of information about Daniel Pink calls it like there used to be, it was like this concept of caveat emptor and caveat vendite or something. And it was like buyer beware, right? Like in 20, 30 years ago, there wasn't the internet where people can, find out about everything. The sellers had all of the information and they would just kind of let it, drip little by little to the buyer, and they were always at the advantage. But now it's like seller beware, because buyers have all this information about you prior to even talking to you, right? So how can you tell them a story that lands to them, to their specific use case, right? And that's a different story that you would find on. It's not like those stories on our website aren't good. It's just that they're very generic, and they're other people's stories, right? So like I tend to think of trying to understand somebody and craft a narrative around, like, again, the credibility where it belongs. And it's not necessarily through me. People don't want to like me to say things like, I think where people might go wrong, it's like, well, like that guy. Okay, I've helped someone do exactly this thing, same thing, and this is how our software helps people do XYZ, because like our marketing teams determined that XYZ exists, and this is what most of our customers are doing, right? And it's just kind of very like salesy, right? Like if I say that versus hey, like even if I'm cold calling you or emailing you or something like that, in my realm, I might say, like, hey, XYZ customer, hey, like, so I see your role as like head of learning and development at XYZ company. And, a lot of times, like, I don't know, the last times I was just on the like talking with like two people in your same role, and they were like really challenged with like having to, when it was like looking at reports, it wasn't that people were taking tests, they could see that in their reports, but it was really hard for them to understand like how their courses really helped impact the business and move other metrics in the business. They really had no great way to see that. They were cobbling together reports from multiple different places, and it was really time consuming, and they really couldn't tell a really good story to their executives to get buy-in from this. Like, I'm curious if any of that all resonates with you, or maybe how are you all handling that? So I'm kind of curious. I'm asking them a question. I'm not just saying, believe me because it's me, or, hey, I'm trying to put credibility around other customers who have seen certain things. So I'll be like, hey, other people that, are dealing with your same situation, this is some of the things that they told me. How does that like relate to how you do it, or how does that compare and contrast to how you handle things? And I'll be like, oh my gosh, I deal with that same thing, or not really at all, Alex. I don't deal with that at all. I'm like, great, like help me under. I say things like, help me understand like how you approach that, or I might say something like, have you considered this, this type of way of doing it, or do you guys have a different approach? Like, I feel like have you
Mm.
considered is a great term too, because people would be like, no, I haven't, or yeah, we did and didn't work because, so they can tell you more information. Again, back to the understanding strategy of telling stories. But yeah, I always think about phrasing that narrative of the story around someone else, not myself, that has credibility, like customers, like, reviews, like, hey, in our reviews, people tend to choose us because, that sort of thing, is
Hmm.
kind of how I
Yeah.
like to craft stories.
Yeah, and that's all. It really resonates with me because it all comes back to listening essentially, which is always where we begin with clients when we're teaching storytelling. We actually, it's not like people come in and say, "Okay, here's my story," and then I'm going to critique it and make it better for you. But rather, we start with listening, and everything you've described to me is part of listening. You're demonstrating to this prospect that you've listened to other clients, and here's what they said the problems and challenges were. So here you go. I'm giving you the benefit of that. So that's credibility as well. And then, depending on that prospect's answer, you're then listening to them and feeding that back and asking questions that just keep you in listening mode, essentially, until such time that the prospect gives you permission to tell a story, which also
Yeah.
goes back to what I had, kind of lived through with this car salesperson, right? Is that there was a certain point where it was okay to tell me a story. Before that, I don't know if I would have even listened to the story if they came out of the
Yeah.
gate with that story, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
You-
yeah. Go ahead.
Did you buy the car from him?
In the end, no, but it wasn't because of the fact that we
Others
didn't.
would have asked.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. In the end, no, I forget exactly why, but it was interesting because he built trust. We came back, because of that. Really, we were ready to leave,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
we gave it another shot, and we were ready to leave because of that first interaction, and also the car didn't check all the boxes. But then when he told us that story, like, okay, this is worth coming back and
Yeah.
so we did, and we did another test round. And in the meantime, we'd gone to another dealership, completely different experience. There was not an army of people that came to us as soon
Mm.
as we came out of the car. In fact, we had time to go into it, asked for someone, they came in, they were pretty cool, pretty relaxed about it all, which was a much better vibe for us, and asked us lots of questions about our lifestyle, where we lived, what we were looking for, etc.
Yeah.
But because of that story, we still, even though we were pretty set on this is the one, we went back to that other dealership because of that story. Like, you got
Yeah.
to give them another chance. But
Yeah.
yeah, it just didn't check all those boxes in terms of features. But yeah,
Yeah.
so it's kind of interesting. But the thing I wanted to ask, as we get closer to the time here, it's flying by. We're enjoying this conversation. There's a question that we ask of all of our guests, Alex, and that is to tell us about an experience that has shaped who you are today, something that still influences you, informs the way you think.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I mean, I'm gonna go like it's gonna sound very sad. But like I learned so many different things from it, and I think like I just have to go back to 2019, right before COVID. So 2019, I actually, the date that kind of like is seared into my memory is 9/25/2019, and that date means a lot of things for a lot of reasons. I ended up getting laid off of a sales job for 7 years. I had it, loved the company at one point, but knew that it was kind of time within the last like year or so to leave. And, just blindsided, totally blindsided. It was actually cold calling a list of people. And I was like at the top of the leaderboard, 130%, just, laid off with a couple other people. I'd never been laid off before, and just, totally like hit me out of nowhere. Um, And that was right before COVID. And then a month later, I mean, this is kind of multiple experiences, but it was like a time frame. And my dad calls me out of the blue, and it was like multiple blindsides. Like, I don't know if you like one blindside car accident would be enough, but like it would be like if you had multiple blindside car accidents
Mm,
within weeks of each other. And this was a personal blindside. My father calling me out of the blue, 79 years old at the time, and tells me he has leukemia.
mm,
And said, I don't want you to worry. I feel totally fine. It's just a marker in my blood, and we're getting tests, and I just want you to know it's like the form that it could be like years, but I feel totally fine. It was around this time of year, so went to see him at Thanksgiving and went to Christmas with my father back. This is approaching 4 years now, and so you learn a lot about how to handle rejection. You learn a lot about how to be how gratitude is more than just being waiting for like happy things, waiting for joy to experience gratitude. I kind of I look at it the other way around. I want to actually experience gratitude and tell people thank you, and then that gives me joy. And so like that experience taught me, hey, in this time, I was actually thankful that I could, be out of work to see my
mm,
dad and to have these experiences with my father. Like I was at his bedside day in, day out. I mean, it ended up getting really, actually kind of like moved a lot faster. He was in ICU just weeks later. And he's telling me stories, and I have like 200 recordings on my phone. So like, just that really shaped how I look at just the world, and just kind of pushing through. Like, I was already somebody that kind of accept rejection and stuff, but like at some points in all of our careers, I feel like we don't know that we are where we need to be, or we're not enough or anything. And that kind of really made me think, like, if he's been going through all this and fighting for his life, and I just remember telling he really like ended up joking around a lot in the hospital. So he would say things like, "I'm grateful to God for every day she lets me live." And not she lets me live. Like, so he's a very progressive guy, and he would always like do like, "Who's the president today, sir?" Because they want to make sure you don't lose all your faculties. And he would look, and people that can't see me and are listening, "I am the greatest president ever. People are saying that that in the history of presidents, I am the greatest president." So he would do a Trump impersonation in the ICU. And just this guy, amazing stories that I could do a whole podcast on the stories from that
mm,
period. But it kind of taught me
Shame.
like to be
Yeah.
grateful, yeah, for those moments, and to know like, hey, maybe if my career isn't like where I'm supposed to be, I'm where I need to be, and I'm doing what I need to be. And so like I've always kind of took that with me through that experience.
mm.
But yeah, no, thanks for like asking me that, and helping me
Yeah.
remember some of those things.
Thank you. And that's such an important thing you just shared. And I know when I was going through my serious elder care issue, that was an
Hmm.
expression I came up with. You are where you're supposed to be right now, because it
Mm.
can be such a fragmented time of different things pulling you in so many different directions. And I think that is looking at you're coming up against, and what you need to get through, and just
Yeah,
working it into the mix, and just appreciating where you are at the time
yeah,
and what's possible. So
yeah,
thank you for that honest, overview. And your dad sounded like a
yeah.
great guy, and
Yes,
you should do that podcast, of course.
I might. Yeah,
Yeah, the beautiful, beautiful answer, and thank you for sharing that with us, and the personal that personal experience, the vulnerability as well, and it's very much appreciated, and I think we've kind of sort of come full circle, right? We started this by saying that to sell is human, and here we right back to the humanity of things. That's kind of been the through line throughout, and why would it be any different in sales? This is who we are as people. We're
yeah,
multidimensional, and things happen that are sad, things happen that are happy, and I think this just helps people to kind of see that view as well. So thanks for that answer. Really appreciate it. Before we let you go, I'd love to know if there's anything you would want to leave our audience with, whether that's a particular resource or website. I know we've talked about a couple of books and different people, but anything else you'd want to let our listeners know about?
Yeah, first, thanks for having me on. I think, just like I think no matter what your role is, I think like whether you're a leader of people or manager, like no matter what your role is, like ask yourself, what are you doing? Again, like I said earlier, what are you doing each day? I totally read that book To Sell as Human, but what are you doing every day where like maybe it's just an idea that you're bringing up, right? The next time you have to, influence change or, it can feel like really like nervous or like it can feel like okay I have to be very put on an act or I have to like be a certain way or I have to do certain things like the person's wanting, just kind of think like ask yourself like what how can I meet the person where they are right now. What is the person? I don't know what they need. So you can't assume you know what someone needs, right? Like that's just something you can't do, but we do it so much. It's like this customer because they don't have that much money, or this person because they are where they are right now. I have to be a certain way. Don't assume, just, kind of ask and try to understand. And like, yeah, wow, like that seems like, really frustrating what's going on right now. Like, tell me more about that. Help me understand. Like, just be curious, right? Like when you're curious, then you're not really like selling something for you. Again, you start getting to that realm with your being more of like a co-creator with them in whatever they're doing, right? And people like that. And then you can kind of help move them to something. I'll end with like a story, being that this is a narrative. I call my dad one of the best pure human centered sales people, even though he was, his job wasn't in sales. I actually think he did insurance sales and he didn't do well at it. Probably because he thought like he compared himself to all these like bigwig, he wanted to be a millionaire, and people that were like that sort of thing. But when he got into teaching and when he got into like he loved history, that's where he really connected with students, and people would still to this day, oh my God, your dad made me love history and made me really see it in a different way. And I think like it was because he really tried to like see people. Like when he was in the hospital, he had lived all over the world and he like learned all these different languages. And so he was in the Peace Corps and he lived in the Ivory Coast in Africa and he knew like 8 or 9 different languages. And so when you're in a hospital, typically there's a lot of nurses that are from all over the world, and they speak different languages. And so there was a couple nurses that would come through and they would speak and he would know, like he would start speaking them to them in their native tongue. And one of them came in one day and started speaking. She was from, he's like, this is just a great question you could ask anyone. If you want to like really start a great conversation with anyone, just ask someone this question. I love asking it. And it's just, where are you from originally? And I think like that last word originally, like, where are you from? Like, okay, some people think it's where you live now. Like I live in
Right.
Florida, but where I from originally is Omaha, Nebraska. Wow. Never been. What's like great about Omaha, Nebraska? Or what, tell me about how was it growing up in Omaha, Nebraska, right? That's another great. How is it growing up where you're from, right? So
Mm.
the way my dad would do it is uh, this person would come in, where are you from originally? Sierra Leone. The next thing he goes is he says, how de body? It blows me away. I mean, this guy has leukemia throughout his body. How de body? How de body is like Creole. It's this like African language for how are you? How is the body? And she was like shocked, like that this guy who is this white guy in a hospital in Shady Grove, Maryland, knows her language. And so she starts saying, and he lived in Sierra Leone for a year. So he had to learn some of that. So they start talking in this language. And I was like, still chills to this day. And I mean, you know what he got out of that? More, response. He got like probably more
Mm.
pudding. He got like whenever, like, because they wanted to come, they were just coming to like talk to him. They weren't even coming because, they had to. They didn't look at it as a chore. He
Yeah.
created this experience where they wanted to be there. And same sort of thing if we're talking about a car dealership or, an idea at work or whatever you're doing, like if you try to understand people, if you make people feel seen, heard, and understood, like you're more apt to get whatever you're trying to get a lot easier and just connect with more people in your life. So yeah, try to do that and be like my dad. His name was Alonzo Smith. And so I
Mm.
take a lot after my dad. So
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. Beautiful. Thank you for that, and it's very inspiring. We've heard some great stories today. Thank you for that. And yeah, what I'm taking away from this is just the value of curiosity, very value of curiosity, gratitude, all these things we've talked about, and yeah, so much humanity as well. So thanks for going there with us, Alex, and thanks for being with us today. And yeah, thanks Julienne for being here as well. I know your throat is not the best right now, and you have a little cough. So thank you. I'm grateful that you are here, despite that.
But I wasn't missing this podcast or anything. So thank you for your patience, everybody. It's always a joy to meet and listen to backstories and see all the interconnections. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to turn to our listeners now. And if you feel like you would like to know more about Alex and his company and what he does, you can feel free to go to our website, narrative.com, narrativ.com/podcast, where you can find this podcast with the episode notes with lots of different links. Also, some of the links to the books we talked about and some of the people we talked about as well, if you want to learn more about them. And as always, if you've been inspired by this session, certainly such as I have, you can certainly look at narrative.com and see if there's anything there that you would like to enroll in. We do lots of group training programs as well as one-on-one coaching, especially if you want to learn how to tell a story that you can use in your sales pitch, as we've talked about today. It's a great resource as well. We're always happy to listen to anyone who comes to us, so please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. And please leave a review wherever you find your podcast. That's what drives the word of mouth. And I really look forward to our next one. Thanks, Julienne, again for being my co-host. And thanks, Alex, for being with us. Thank you so much.
thank you all for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Of course. Bye, everyone.
For more information on the narrative listening and storytelling method and how it can help your business, go to narrative.com.